Okay, so in this video I'm going to be going over a translation of chapter 28, and obviously, as always, I'm going to be pointing out certain items that by watching this video you will earn an easy and free 100 by putting them into the Canvas quiz. So, chapter 28, preparing to go shopping. Mane erat. It was early in the morning. Erat, as you well know, should be from the verb sum, esse fui futurus, and it is the imperfect eram, eras, erat. So it was early in the morning. Aurelia in cubiculo sedibat. Aurelia was sitting in the bedroom. Crines eos curabant duae anculae. The duae anculae are your two subjects here, or I should say your subjects, and there are two of them. And it is the ones who are taken care of. Curo curare. Do not confuse curo curare with curo curere. Listen to the difference. Curare, first conjugation, versus curere, which is third conjugation. This one, not run, but rather take care of. So two slave ladies were taking care of her hair. Eis, as you know, comes from is, ea, id, eis, and as such it can be his, her, or its. But since we were talking about Aurelia, we translate it as hers or of her, the hair of her. Those two ladies were taken care of. And then what we find is that we have our first relative pronoun in this chapter. This chapter is focusing on relative pronouns that obviously introduce a relative clause, which is a clause that is not able to stand on its own. Everything that I have underlined in red would not be able to stand on its own. Now, quorum comes from qui, qui, quod, quis, 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 qui, 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 quim, quam, quo, qua, quo, qui, 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 quorum, quorum, and so it is in the genitive plural. And we have altera and altera that we are going to obviously take with that quorum. So we will translate two slave ladies, altera, one of whom was holding the mirror, speculum, the other of whom was combing her hair. And so why quorum is in the genitive, in its clause, is because it is functioning as the genitive part of a whole. Of the whom, we have the one part over here, and then the other part over here in the form of those two slave ladies. So its case is genitive. But it is not going to share its case with its antecedent. Remember that the antecedent is the word that the relative pronoun is referring to or relating to, and it is going to have in common with its antecedent the same number, because the slave ladies are plural, quorum is going to be plural, and gender, because the slave ladies are feminine, quorum is going to be feminine. They will not necessarily have the same case, because in their individual clauses, the main clause in blue, and then the subordinate clause, they have different functions, do the antecedent and that relative. So, reading it again, the two slave ladies were caring for her hair, one of whom was holding the mirror, and the other of whom was combing the hair. Continuing on. Phrygia, and again, that would be in blue, quae crines negligenter. So, Phrygia, who was combing pectab, or pectabat, the hair negligently, that Phrygia was annoying her mistress. Everything I have underlined in blue could be on its own, an independent clause. Phrygia was annoying her mistress. But then the relative clause has the quae crines negligenter pectabant. Now remember, I've said before that the way by which you will take an adjective and make it into an adverb, in English we add an ly. But in Latin, you're either going to, on a first and second declension adjective, take off the ending and add a long e, and on third declension adjectives, take off the ending and add iter. However, if the adjective has an nt as the last two letters of its stem, like for example, negligens in the nominative, and then negligentis, what you will do is that you will simply add, instead of an iter, you will add an er. And so you end up with negligenter. We see this negligens, negligentis as the adjective, meaning negligent, in the form of negligentes, whereas here it is negligently, or carelessly. So, Phrygia, who was combing the hair carelessly, that Phrygia was annoying her mistress. Continuing on. Sira, and that is your main clause, Sira was not holding the mirror well. And
Mr.
so,
Schubert to the front
as
office.
is per usual,
Mr. Schubert
you will
to the front
underline the main clause in blue. Now here what we have is a clause that is a subordinate clause, But quod is not the relative qui qui quod. Instead, it is the word because. We know that it is not a relative, which a qui qui quod, either nominative singular neuter or accusative singular neuter, because it does not have a singular neuter antecedent. Sira is obviously a feminine word, and so therefore Sira, because her hand was trembling, was not holding the mirror well. Aurelia igitur. Therefore, Aurelia, excuse me, continuing on, the one negligente, or I should say the one vexata. The fourth principal part is the perfect passive participle. Vexo, vexare, vexavi, vexatus. And here I know that it is modifying Aurelia because participles are adjectives, and thus it has the same case number and gender, and thus tells us what kind of Aurelia. The Aurelia, therefore, having been annoyed by the negligence. So negligenter is negligently, negligentes is negligent as the adjective, and this is the noun, negligence in and of itself. So having been annoyed by the negligence of them, earum is genitive plural, from the chart id, suddenly she shouted, quam negligentes estis. Now this quam is like this quod in that it shares a form with one of the relatives, but it is not a relative. Instead, since it has no antecedent, that would be feminine and singular, and it is not introducing a relative clause, it is going to be the simple word of exclamatory, how. So she says, how careless, how negligent y'all are, she shouted. And so at this point, your first word is that word vexata. V-E-X-A-T-A. V-E-X-A-T-A. And that's your first word that you need to go ahead and put in. She continues after she shouted, abite, abite. Go away, go away. Vocate Corneliam. Call Cornelia. Now, a word about abite, abite. We saw that all the way back in the third chapter of Ecce Romani, and it is of course the command of eo, ire, ii, but what we merely have here is an ob on the front of it. And so whereas in the plural, when you say go as a command, it is ite, if you're talking to one person, it is actually just the word e. And so if you were yelling at one person, go away, instead of what Aurelia is doing, which is yelling at two, you would say abi, abi, but that is the plural. And so she continues by saying, call Cornelia. I want to lead her, and there we are, make whom with me into the city, in plus accusative, into. Nevertheless, statum exierunt ancillae. Immediately the slave ladies did. Remember again, this is that same verb that we just had a second ago, which of course would be, and I suppose I'll write in that orange, eo, ire, and let's get rid of that, e, with nothing more on the front of it than the x, so exeo, ex ire, and ex ee, meaning that my perfect stem is exi, which I can see right there, and then my perfect ending e is the it. We see the exact same situation here with in it in the next line, in which instead of an ex, which we could get rid of if I could actually do it, I wouldn't quite able to do it the whole, but it would be in e. And so again, you have trouble. There we are. The ini being the perfect stem, and then e is the it. So immediately the slave ladies did go out. Soon Cornelia did go in, has gone in, or simply went in, if you would like. And it's in plus accusative, into the bedroom. And your second word to put in is that word in it. I-N-I-I-T. Make sure you get those three I's in there. So I-N-I-I-T. She then continues on by saying, Cur me vocavisti mater, does Cornelia say, why have, in the perfect tense, you called me? Why did you call me mom in the vocative case? Mater, because she is talking directly to him. So Aurelia responded. Aurelia responded. Remember that if it were Aurelia responds, it would be respond, in which the present stem is identical to the perfect stem, but since it is respondeo respondere with a second conjugation, it would have that long E with the macron eaten by the T. He, she, or it responds right now versus he, she, or it, and it's a she, responded. And then she continues to say, pater tuus amicos quosdam, and then ad canam hodie invitavit. Your dad today has invited friends ad canam to dinner. Now you have this word here, quosdam. Quosdam is nothing more than the qui qui quo chart with a D-A-M.
Mr. Sullivan, please come to the front office.
Whenever you have a qui qui quo,
the front office.
all of them, I mean, it's a qui qui quo, quis, 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 qui, 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 and so forth and so on. Once you add that D-A-M suffix, you are then now with a demonstrative adjective that means a certain. So here it tells us what kind of friends. Certain friends did he invite. Now note, you don't look at the D-A-M part to figure out what it is modifying. Instead, you look at the qui qui quod part. And so quos is accusative plural with amicos, and thus we know that it is certain friends. Likewise, we'll see it down here, quem dam, and that's really an M. It's going to be that whenever an M is going to appear in Latin in front of the letter D, it's not quemdam, but quindam, because M's and N's are a rather common sound. So, your dad has invited certain friends to dinner ad canam today in quibus. And so we have yet another relative pronoun that introduces a relative clause. And its antecedent are, of course, those friends. That is plural because amicos is plural. That is masculine. And it's 3 forms that you would see in the chart. Actually 6 if you include the data. But this is obviously the ablative, the object of the preposition. Quibus, quibus, quibus. We know that we're dealing with a masculine form because it has to have the same gender as its antecedent. So, in whom or among whom there are famous senators. And so that's how we'll know which one of them we are. So your next third item is that word quosdam. Q-U-O-S-D-A-M. So make sure you get all it spelled correctly. Q-U-O-S-D-A-M. She then goes on to say that porcum servus jam amet. A slave already now has bought. I know that it is a perfect tense because this verb, if I were to give the principal parts, mo, oh, there we are, emere, and then amy, well, you have the exact same present stem, second principal part, as a perfect stem. And the present stem would have then attached to it the present junk in the middle for a third conjugation, which is an I, and then your ending T. There are 3 parts, emit. Whereas over here, if I were to take the perfect stem, which has that long E, E is the it. And you can see the difference between, on the left-hand side, she buys, or he buys, is buying, does buy right now, versus bought, did buy, has bought. So a slave already has bought a pig, but I have in mind I ipsa. I myself. Ipsa is in the nominative, so it obviously intensifies whatever is that nominative, and the nominative is I. So I myself have in mind, ire, to go, in plus accusative, into the city, to a certain merchant. Again, you look at the quem to let you know that it's modifying mercatore, and it's qui qui quod with the D-A-M. So, a certain merchant, cuius. Now, cuius is from that qui qui quo chart, meaning, of course, whose or of whom. If you were going to translate it, whose, you would simply say, a certain merchant whose shop is not far, procul ab away. But if you wanted to say of whom, as the translation, you would say, to a certain merchant, the shop of whom. It's a matter of turning around the word order in English, so it sounds more natural and idiomatic. Here again, cuius appears 3 times in the chart. Cuius, cuius, cuius. But you know which one it is because it is being replacing or relating to the mercatorum, and since mercatorum is masculine, that tells you it's the masculine cuius. The cuius, 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 we're talking about the masculine one. Nevertheless, to a certain merchant whose shop is not far away, for ile, that guy, meaning that one, nominative, is accustomed, soleo solere, to sell vendere, the optimos glires, the best dormice. And so the dormice are your direct object of the infinitive vendere. And so apparently that she wants to go and pick out these dormice, which are the delicacy of on her own, and she'll be the one to select them. She trusts the slave to go and pick out whatever pig that it is going to be that they will serve. Your fourth item is actually that word cuius, C-U-I-U-S, C-U-I-U-S. So, only one more sentence or so. It says, si tu vis mecum ire. Now, vis comes from, of course, the verb wolo wele, and if I were to conjugate it in the present tense, it would be wolo, vis with a V, and wolt. And it's irregular, so you just have to know that it is not I want, not he wants, but rather you want. And it has the to there to emphasize the subject. So if you want to go with me, expectad, nothing but the infinitive expectare with the RE chopped off as the imperative, await me or watch out for me in the atrium. Interia. Meanwhile, Eubebo, from eubeo, eubere, but bobis, bit making a future. I will order, meanwhile, I will order the slaves to carry, to bring, fero fere telilasis, the sedan chairs ad januam, to the door. Sedan chairs are kind of like the litter. They're a portable kind of conveyance, but instead of being a bed to where more than one people can actually ride, the sedan chair is designed for only one singular person to be carried around, and we will see that in the next chapter of 29. So, hopefully you have watched this and used it to your benefit of studying for the chapter 28 quizzes, and your fifth and final item is merely that irregular verb, you want, vis, V-I-S, V-I-S, vis. And so put that in, and obviously it'll be an easy 100. So good luck, and hopefully you will do well. Thanks.